everyone. I'm Jess from Prospectors and Core Safe. We're your exploration gear and core handling experts. And I'm your virtual host today. So welcome to GeoHug. So John Holliday, what an absolute pleasure it is to have you today. John really needs no introduction with this crowd, but I'll just say that he was one of the principal discoverers and site manager of the Tier 1 Cadia Gold Copper Porphyry and the Marsden Copper Gold Porphyry in the Macquarie Arc of the Lachlan Fold Belt. More recently, he has worked as a consultant and is currently closely involved with Alice Queen Limited and Kincora Copper of the Macquarie Arc in New South Wales. So I'm thrilled to have you here. I'm really excited to hear this history talk about KDR. So thank you again, and over to you.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Jess. So I've got to share my screen here.
Yeah.
What Daniel should have done when he went on his trip to Bathurst with his school when he was 5 years old is he should have gone on to Orange, because that's where all the gold really is, not in Bathurst. So hello to everyone, and thanks for being along for this presentation. It's a sort of beer o'clock presentation. It's mostly history and light stuff. There's not too much technical stuff in it. And it's not a company thing, so it doesn't have a disclaimer. But I thought I'd better say it's not, it's my personal opinion and viewpoint of the whole Cadia discovery process. It's not from Newcrest Mining or anything like that, or anyone else. It's just mine. So I'm responsible for it all. I haven't got a slide showing where Cadia is, but it's 20 kilometres south of Orange. Volcanics that hosts Australia's best porphyry deposits, which Cadia is probably the best. Now, we all stand on the shoulders of other people. So, if you ask a local, some of the old locals, they'd say who discovered Cadia, they'd say some prospector way back, and in a way they're right. Cadia copper ore was discovered in 1851, and that's the same year as the gold rushes started. And so there was lots of small mining through the years. And then when the World Wars came along, First and Second World War, the magnetite skarns were very useful for iron ore production. They used to ship the magnetite to Lithgow, where Australia's first steelworks started. Then there was ongoing small-scale gold mining, etc., etc. And then through the 50s and 60s, a bit of exploration by big companies. And then the modern sort of mining era started, and this little Canadian junior called Pacific Copper started focusing on Cadia, and they did a lot of work and explored Big Cadia, Little Cadia, drill holes scattered around. And there's a picture, for instance, of the original old Cadia village, no longer there, but totally consumed by the local, the big mine infrastructure nowadays. There's the
Sorry, John. I think we're on the wrong spreadsheet still. Can you check which?
It says, yeah, your screen sharing is paused. I'm not sure why. Resume share. Can you see that now, Jess?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Righto. Sorry for those problems. What happens? Maybe it was Chinese hackers. Yeah, Pacific Copper was a small Canadian junior, and the junior world's how most of us work nowadays. Back then, most geologists worked for big companies, but there were still juniors around, and Pacific Copper, run by Peter Gibb, was very busy at Cadia, and they really knew it was a porphyry project, but their time was wrong. People weren't interested in gold, copper prices were low, so eventually they sought various joint venture partners, and eventually they sold it out. Amongst the things they got up to was putting in adits, like a picture here of the magnetite adit at Big Cadia, to collect samples for metallurgical test work. And there's still hidden away in the valley at Cadia the original Pacific Copper pilot plant, which no one knows about much these days because it's pretty difficult to actually ever get into that site. And then we get to the late 80s, and this is where I sort of started to get involved. I was working for BHP Gold, and BHP Gold purchased the Browns Creek gold mine at Blaney nearby. And I had the job of trying to find other resources in the Browns Creek area to add to BHP's land holdings. And the biggest resource in the area was Cadia. I mean, Pacific Copper had proved up 38 million tonnes of relatively low-grade copper and gold at that time. But in 1986, 38 million tonnes of copper and gold was a big deposit, and that was in New South Wales. So I finished up, I just rang up and said, I'm from BHP Gold, you know, we'd like to have a look at Cadia. And yeah, got to go and have a look over it, and actually made a purchase offer, which was rejected because by that stage, Pacific Copper was owned by Alan Bond, and they decided if BHP was interested, we should do something about this. So they came and drilled the hell out of Big Cadia, which is the skarn deposit at Cadia, decided it wasn't a good enough standalone gold deposit, so they put the place up for tender. And BHP had another crack at it, and the tender was rejected. And then Alan Bond started to go broke. I don't know if many of you recall all the wild stuff Alan Bond got up to with his firms and some of the other Western Australians in the 80s, but Alan Bond started to go broke. So he sold some assets, including Pacific Copper, to FAI Insurances, which was run by another sort of well-known entrepreneur of the time, Laurie Adler. And we thought at BHP, I don't think an insurance company would really want Cadia, so we went back and managed to come to an agreement to buy the thing off them. And very shortly after BHP Gold had bought Cadia, which included the freehold land, BHP Gold was merged with Newmont Australia and became Newcrest. So that's how Newcrest finished up owning Cadia. And the purchase was completed. Crikey, I'd have to look up the documents. I can't remember the price, but it seems like a song now compared to modern day prices. And just for interest, this is the Browns Creek gold mine in 1986-87. That's, you know, what the Central West can be like in the middle of winter. If BHP hadn't bought Browns Creek, you wouldn't have Newcrest at Cadia. So I went to Cadia as the first geologist. I was running the site, actually. It was a really interesting place. We had the old engine house there, which ultimately we organised to have restored. And my first task was to try and turn Big Cadia skarn, where most of the previous drilling had been done, to turn it into a satellite resource or a new resource for BHP Gold. So we got in there drilling with some pretty primitive equipment by modern standards. There's Les Anderson of Anderson Drilling. He finished up doing a lot of the drilling at Cadia. Yeah, up on the top of, very top of Big Cadia, drilling a hole in 1991. So that's a bit of the history of how we got there. Now, how did we sort of get to turn it into a big porphyry project again? Well, firstly, let's get a little bit technical with some simple geology here. This is the sort of simplified stratigraphic column. The mineralisation is hosted in those bottom rocks, the Ordovician, mostly in the forest roots volcanics. They were intruded in the late Ordovician, well, it's now the early Silurian, I think, that part, by the Cadia Hill monzonite, a composite intrusive complex. That was subsequently covered over by Silurian sediments and then covered over again by tertiary basalts and then covered over again by pretty thin recent material. So when you plot all that up on a geology map, this is the Cadia geology map, and the different deposits. Cadia Hill, which was really the main first discovery that got it all going, is there. This is the intrusive complex, the monzonitic part in pink, the dioritic part more in orange. This is the Wiimala Ordovician sediments out here, and the green is the forest roots volcanics. The pinky purple there, or mauve, is the shales, the cover shales, and then ochre colour there is the volcanics. So that's the situation. The deposits are aligned in this northwest to southeast trend. There were two skarns there. This is Big Cadia, where we did all that very early drilling. This is Little Cadia, another skarn. This is where the 38 million tonnes was. And there were lots of little old workings all over the place. So what happened with the drilling on the Big Cadia skarn is that Newcrest proved as well that it probably really wasn't economic. And I sort of have these memories of senior people in Newcrest coming up and telling me that if I didn't find something better soon, I might finish up having to take a retrenchment package and things like that. And one of the areas there that really interested us was Cadia Hill. Now, Cadia Hill, there was a little open cut mine there. And in fact, it had been mined in the 1870s to 1930s. And in the 1930s, a BHP geologist had visited the place. And this is out of his notebooks. And I had copies of this from Hill Open Cut and start putting all the old data together. Am I still right there, Jess? Because it's just saying my internet is unstable. Yeah.
Yeah, you're fine on this side, yep.
Okay, so yeah, at Cadia Hill there was this old open cut. And there were these previous explorers' drill results there from both Pacific Copper and joint venture partners, which included Homestake. And you can see the scale there, 100 metres. This is the little open cut, and all around it, they'd done soil sampling, they'd done RAB drilling, they'd done core holes, and there were core holes like this one, HC8 by Homestake, with 96 metres at 0.6 grams per tonne gold. Well, at that stage, everyone thought, well, you know, that's ridiculously low grade. And you know, you've got to push the limits sometimes to make discoveries. And we sort of thought, well, yeah, that's low grade, but it's pretty long and encouraging. And this gold anomaly is open to the west. So that's a picture of the little old open cut. It was hidden away in a pine forest, a very dark and dank place. But when we looked around the walls of this and cleaned them all up, we got very encouraged by the geology we saw as well. So then Newcrest, we did a soil survey over the whole area. So the little open cut is there. This slide shows some original sampling by Homestake of soils with values. See, they had a value in here of 1100 ppb, I think. No, I think that's ppm. I can't see because of my, yeah, 100 ppb. Our soil anomaly, when we finally completed it, was this big northwest, southeast trending thing at 400 ppb gold there inside the red. And we finished up drilling these early drill holes. That's some of the early drill holes that we sort of fleshed out the discovery with. So that's the section. We go back there. This is through NC40. Some people regard that as the discovery hole, but we drilled that, and yeah, instead of getting 0.6 gold, we got 1.52, 168 at 1.52. We had trenches on the surface that were pretty good too, and other holes around all getting like this, these sorts of grades. And all of these had 0.15 to 0.2% copper with them as well. So there's a good copper credit. So it took off, yeah, and now there's a few more discoveries, historical type slides, newspaper articles. This is the Central West Daily. In 1993, the area Cadia Hill was then currently called Mars Forest then because of the pine forest. And we'd moved in and felled a lot of the pine trees you can see in the background, and we were drilling away. And yeah, that's me when I looked a fair bit younger than I do nowadays. But the key thing, I think, for discovering Cadia Hill was really sort of a partnership between me and Dan Wood. Dan was a great mentor and knew porphyry deposits, and he really sold it to the Newcrest board. He realised that if we could come up with enough tonnes with this low stripping ratio, like in this top slide, even at those grades, it could be economic. And yeah, he got the board on, the Newcrest board on board, so to speak, with this, and the whole thing took off after that. Now that's some Cadia Hill core in the monzonite. You can see the degree of veining that's there. There's not a huge amount of veining, but it certainly runs pretty good grade gold with that background copper. And you've got your monzonite there with the pink hematization on the potassium feldspars. So yeah, we're in a sort of potassic altered zone really, although the best potassic alteration was just salvages to the veins. And Dan had put dollar values on what we were getting here to, yeah, that's how he helped convince the board of Cadia Hill. So Cadia Hill was really, yeah, a discovery we had to convince people about. And I know a lot of people were still sceptical for a long while that something that low grade would turn into something. I think we were lucky at the time that Newcrest really needed something, so they were really prepared to back us. And then it got into the Sydney Morning Herald. I'm not sure, this is in the early 90s. And then we kept drilling, yeah, and we started doing deeper and deeper holes and finished up with, this is a section right through Cadia Hill. You can see it's actually pretty simple ore body. Southwest dipping, sheeted vein zone, very continuous, no big structural complexity or anything like that. And yeah, it was pretty soon in 1994 that was handed over to a drill out team to turn it into a resource that a mine development could go ahead on. So a few photos here of what went on during this process. I mean, we had this pine forest in the way, and we had to get all these, well, I actually did a bit of, you know, forestry really. I had to organise people to clear pine forest. We had all these big clear tracks through the pine forest. We trenched down all those and sampled the trenches. This is the sort of gear they used to clear the pine trees out after they'd been chainsawed down. There was one incident where one of these things rolled over and fortunately at that time we didn't have to fill out quite as much paper as you would nowadays about things like that. And that's a view of where Cadia, well, the whole Cadia operation is from 1993-94. So you can see drill pads on Cadia Hill here. The old Avon Cut was in the pine forest over the back there. And yeah, this is the western side of Cadia Hill. And if you go out under that big hill out the back, that's where Cadia East is. The little Cadia scarns up the valley there. And yeah, we're back up on a hill south of where Ridgeway is nowadays. All that pine forest's gone. The treatment plant's down here somewhere now. So yeah, this landscape is totally transformed by the modern mine. So moving on, you know, I think we were very lucky at Newcrest to have some really determined and clever people on the board. That included John Quinn, who was the CEO. John was an accountant who loved geology and exploration, and you know, without his drive and Courtney Chamberlain's, who was also on the board, I don't think it would have happened. They decided we're going to go for this and really backed us all the way. They had a really good guy, Garnet Holliday there, who was the first mine manager, who led most of the development of the first mine, Cadia Hill. unfortunately died in a plane crash in Africa quite a few years ago. And yeah, we had a lot of fun. So this is the beer o'clock time stuff. This is our old office at Cadia. It was a decrepit old farmhouse. It had been used as a hangout by people. They'd been growing marijuana in bathtubs in the ceiling, which we had to take out. Pretty primitive really, but we had a lot of fun there, and some people, that's Max Baker, people might know him, Dave Pearson in the background there. When development approval happened in 1998, yeah, we had a bit of a party. So I don't know if, yeah, the champagne corks in midair in this photo, and that's Ian Tedder, Belinda Bird. We used to have Christmas parties with a jazz band down at the old farmhouse. So yeah, it can be a lot of fun when you're on a winning thing like Cadia. Yeah, I think I'm very lucky to have had that chance. So the feasibility was led by Courtney Chamberlain. Yeah, did a fantastic job, and one of the big innovations that he and others came up with was to have a very big SAG mill, and this turned out Cadia got the world's then biggest SAG mill, and I think it's still one of the biggest, or maybe still the biggest in the world. Treatment plant was built. We were still drilling out. I mean, we had all sorts of drill rigs back there then, even old long ear 44s like this one here. That's a view off the western side of Cadia Hill, looking, I think that's Big Cadia, the scarn up there and the hill in the background. And then we moved on. In 1994, I was asked to just continue the exploration while another team was brought in to drill out Cadia Hill. And we thought, well, there's this area to the east of Cadia Hill called the Sulphide Lode. This is a picture of it here. And it's an amazing outcrop, just, you know, big silicious face with lots of pyrite. And everyone had known about this, and this stream down here was called Copper Gully because it was full of leaching copper from Little Cadia further up. But people had sampled over the top of this. You can see it had been cleared off so they could sample it. People had drilled into it, and it was just pretty barren. A bit of a mystery, really. But we decided we'd follow it up. We sort of had the bit between our teeth by then. We were allowed to drill really deep core holes. A standard core hole would be 600 metres long at least. We just knew that the more we drilled, the more we kept finding in this place. So we started drilling out Cadia East, and the first hole was drilled further out near an old Pacific copper hole, which had a little bit of copper in it. And that first hole we drilled still didn't hit any really outstanding stuff, although the copper was improving. So it turned out we were getting closer to Cadia East. But really the discovery was made by just a step out fence to the east of Cadia Hill here. I've got that, I'll put that in a new slide, which I've put in today. But of course, Cadia East now this is an old development plan from 2009. Cadia East now easily the biggest resource at Cadia, and they've got plans to panel cave that through for the next 4 or 5 decades, if they can get approvals to do so. This is a long section of Cadia and shows how we discovered Cadia East. Cadia Hill was known at that stage. Cadia Quarry over here is a smaller, lower grade resource that's only ever been mined just at the top. And then subsequently got backfilled, which is probably why it's not so easy to mine it anymore. Cadia East out here, and you can see inside the red dotted line how big it is. But when we first knew there was mineralisation there was when we drilled this hole NC107 early in '94. the holes actually drilled orthogonal to this section. So it was dipping to the north, went down about 450 metres vertical. And it just shows you that, yeah, you've got to have the confidence that you can drill these long holes and see what you find. Because in the top bit, we drilled through the Ordovician volcanics, and then we went into a real mess zone, and that turned out to be a major thrust fault, which is now called the Gibb Fault. And under that fault, just went into Silurian cover rocks, hundreds of metres of laser-bedded shale type stuff. And I suspect in many programs, people would have stopped the hole and given up. But we kept going, and next thing, you go through an unconformity and back into the Ordovician, and it's mineralised, keeps getting more and more mineralised, and then we're into Cadia East. And that really just set it off. Then we're off drilling, stepping east and east and east, further east, drilling more and more holes, but it was still pretty low grade. It's all being mined now, but the key to making Cadia East what it is was this discovery of this higher grade zone, which we called then Cadia Far East. That name's sort of gone out of use now, and it's all called Cadia East. And that was in 1996. And we had an amazing purple patch then. Hole 494 hit Cadia Far East. Fantastic. We found a higher grade zone in this, and we wanted to drill that out. But then, bang, hole 498 went into Ridgeway, and that was out to the west. Basically, I think Ridgeway would have been eventually found by grid drilling west and Cadia. Yeah, it just, we had this philosophy of doing a lot of bold drilling by then, and we were just so well funded. And that's what you really have to do on porphyry systems. So the Ridgeway area started off as being targeted because we did an IP survey on pretty wide space lines with 200 metre dipoles, trying to see deep. And we had some orientation lines at Cadia East and Cadia Hill, so we sort of knew what sort of response they gave. The only really similar response was this one where Ridgeway is, which is this pretty subtle chargeability anomaly. So we stepped, instead of just, we stepped out a lot further then to the west to test this anomaly. And it's shown on this bottom slide here. The first hole was this little RC hole, 200 metre, well, 194. We couldn't get to 200 because too much water. It had an interesting little vein intersection in it, but that was enough. So we decided to drill behind it, and we originally only drilled down to about here, maybe 600 metres, not looking too interesting, and we went away. And that was hole 371. But quite a while later, Colin McMillan, who was working on this area, said, well, that's going into a little bit of higher copper. Why don't we go and deepen it? So we did deepen it. And next thing, you got 102 metres at 0.13 gold and 0.4 copper in veining that looked very similar. It was in monzonite, to look very similar to Cadia Hill. So that got us going then, and we decided to drill 4 holes all around it, 100 metres out, I think, from each side. We drilled to the east of it, didn't get anything much. Drilled over to the north of it, no significant assays. We drilled behind it, still not good enough. And after some delays, because of lots of wet weather, we drilled to the west of it, which is this hole here, 498, which went right through the middle of Ridgeway. And the assays are on this bottom slide here. You can see, 84 metres at 7.4. These sorts of, those assays sort of, remind one of what alkane's got at Boda nowadays. So, yeah, hopefully they're going to find something similar up there. So, yeah, by 1998, this is a long section we had of Cadia, and you've got the huge Cadia East zone, Cadia Hill, Cadia Quarry with no resource, and Ridgeway over here. We didn't know too much about that still then, but yeah, very high grade. Very rapidly, a decline was approved and put in, and Ridgeway became a focus for quite a while. And then eventually we moved back to Cadia East, and that sort of all got drilled out and turned into a resource over the years. And it's now the only operating deposit there, being mined at present. Ridgeway's under care and maintenance. Cadia Hill's now finished and being filled up with tailings, which, you know, it does have a low grade halo around it, but unfortunately that will never be extracted. It'll be covered with tailings. But I think they've had to, filling it up with tailings proves to be a pretty wise decision. They gained a lot in water saving and stuff by doing that. And that's, yeah, what Cadia looked like in 98. I'm sure there's better long sections of it now. And as a final message, this is an interesting quote from Jeffry Blaney, which some of you may have seen if you've read his book, The Rush That Never Ended. But yeah, at the very time that the government geologist in 1851, Samuel Stutchbury, was at Cadia looking at the copper, he heard about the gold discovery at Ophir and hurried over to Ophir. The interesting thing is that most of the gold was actually back at Cadia. So yeah, far more gold at Cadia than all the diggings in New South Wales produced in 1851. And yeah, that's the end of the talk. I'm happy to take questions about any of it. Finally, what have I learned about all this? Well, firstly, I think I've learned all along, and still the case, you know, exploration is a business that uses science. So the business part of it's really the crucial thing. You know, you have to do deals to get into things. Everything always has to be shown to be economic, things like that. Certainly, discovery is not all neatly planned. Most of this, well, this discovery story I've just given to you, it sort of just happens to you. Much of it, you know, you're doing stuff, but sometimes you make good decisions, sometimes you make bad ones. Yeah, I just feel very lucky to have been in the right place at the right time. You definitely have to push against conventional wisdoms. Certainly at Cadia, we did that with the low grade. People didn't believe that, but like Dan and I had been and seen these low grade mines in the Americas, and we said, well, if they can do it, why can't we do it here? And of course, I always remember that Placer pushed the boundaries with grade when they started up Kidston as well, although Kidston was higher grade than Cadia. You've also really got to envisage the big picture, you know, focus on trying to find something that's large enough to be economic. Don't look at all of your drill core, your whole hole, don't just focus on each individual metre. With porphyry deposits, we used to just lay out huge lines of drill core and go up and down them with garden hoses, trying to match things up and get an overall picture of what we had. And yeah, I guess avoid paralysis by analysis. I mean, the key thing especially in the modern exploration game is to raise enough money so you can go and do quite a lot of drilling, I think. And when people go and drill lots, they come up with things, and people are still doing that in Australia. Of course, there's quite a few exciting new things happening in the last year or two in Western Australia and in New South Wales. In New South Wales, of course, we've got Alkane's Boda, we've got Sky Metals looking at the McPhillamys type thing, and yeah, some interesting things happening. So thank you to everyone for your interest, and yeah, open it up to questions, Jeff. Yes.
Thank you. There's been heaps coming through. There's a few that you'll be able to see in the discussion, but I'll just scroll through to some of the other ones I've been sent. So would Cadia Hill be approved for mining in 2020?
Well, yeah, I think it would be approved. The biggest challenge in 2020 would be that the Cadia Valley probably would have been full of hobby farms, and that would have been the challenge. But if you could buy them all and own the land, you could probably get it approved, I'd be pretty sure.
Excellent.
Just looking at things now.
Yeah, there's a few that someone said, has hole 3 at Bailey's been completed? If so, what are your initial thoughts on the hole compared to hole 1 and 2? Is the drill back at Trundle Park yet? Are gold assays still expected first?
Are there questions for king core or copper type stuff? The drill rigs at Trundle Park at present. We just have a single rig program going there, and it's just started the second hole at Trundle Park. There's a question here. Interested in key differences in lock and fold belt complexes, Cadia versus North Parks versus Copper Hill versus Boda. Well, it seems to me that the big deposits in the Macquarie Arc are on the broader parts of the arc where you've had less deformation. That might be because there's big intrusive buttresses in them. You've just got to look at Cadia. It's a big core part of the arc. North Parks or Goonumbla's the same, as is Cowell and the Cowell Marsden area. And so is the Boda, North Wellington, Boda Kaiser area. So that's where people seem to have made the biggest discoveries. And if you're on the narrower parts, they tend to be more sliced up by structure and to be more just volcanic stratigraphy rather than intrusions underneath. But you know, that's just my view of things, and I'm happy to be proven wrong by someone finding a deposit on another part of the belts. Of course, there's the other belt that does have significant porphyry mineralisation is down around Gidgenbung, but that is a narrow part of it, and it's very sliced up by faulting. So turning something there into a big mine, being able to put a resource on with all that faulting, or even exploring applying the porphyry model, is made very complicated by all the thrust faulting and slicing that's gone on. Cadia is a bit unusual because I don't think anyone really still understands the structural setting there, because actually the Cadia East is higher level in a system than Cadia Hill. Cadia Hill is pushed up by that, over the top of Cadia East by that Gibb fault, across that Gibb fault, sorry. And the exact relationship of Cadia Ridgeway to the rest of Cadia in a structural sense isn't understood either. There's another question here. What is the potential for other porphyry discoveries in the Lachlan Fold Belt? Can Boda be considered the next Cadia? Well, we don't know about Boda at this stage because there's only 5 drill holes into it at depth, but one of those holes has got beautiful intersections, so you're going to have to drill around it. And we'll find out just what's going to happen there then. I think a lot of the shallower stuff they've got, they're going to have to push the limits to make that economic because it is pretty low grade. Yeah, there's a lot of other complicated questions here. Why is the Cadia system so gold rich compared to other porphyries in the belt? I think Dave Cook might be in on this call. I think that's a good one for him to answer. If he's, it's an alkalic porphyry system, and alkalic porphyries seem to be richer in gold than calcalcalics, etc. So, but you know, it's something that no one's really ever answered completely. The one about IOCGs, yeah, I can't answer that. I'm sorry. Dave just told me I made a good answer. Thanks, Dave. Have you got any more questions there, Jess?
Oh, another one's just come through. Is deep drilling a key for the Lachlan Fold Belt?
Yeah, look, I think that's absolutely the case nowadays. The history of exploration, you know, it moves on. There's an arrow of time to it. So the early people came in, everyone did soil sampling. They look on the surface, you've got all the old timers work, all the old workings to go from. And then gradually people start having to look deeper, look undercover. So, for instance, North Parks was found just undercover, and Cadia was sort of partly exposed, but you can see Cadia East under 60 to 200 metres of cover. Cal was just exposed. Marsden was undercover, and Boda sort of pretty much, yeah, very subtle indications on surface for what they had, and yeah, it just shows that by sort of boulder deep drilling over some years, they've been able to really get onto something there. When I was with Newcrest, we had a lot of scope to do deeper drilling, and we do a lot of deeper core drilling, but it depended what you had nearby. For instance, we had the Trundle area, and we didn't attack that nearly as much with deep drilling as we had, say, Cadia or Cadia Hill, or Marsden even, which is probably what we should have done back then. But we were pushing things, you know, when we started doing 200 metre deep RC holes, like that one that discovered Ridgeway, people had never done holes that deep with RC in New South Wales. So I don't know why. It just, yeah, it's hard to get the rigs to go that deep, but yeah, exploration techniques move on, and so drilling has as well. So they've got much better drill rigs nowadays that can go to considerable depth, over a kilometre quite easily. And yeah, I think for porphyry deposits, that is the way forward. Now, that might not be the case for every deposit, depends on how high grade it might be, etc. I see Mark Arundel thinks it's not the case for him, and I'd sort of agree. Yeah, I think you can still find some significant deposit types by looking shallower, but except in, yeah, it's a bit hard to imagine how you would find a porphyry now without having to look fairly deep, because the Macquarie Ark's pretty limited in extent, and a lot of it's been pretty thoroughly explored. That's why people are starting to go more undercover, and there's now been a pegging rush on the Junee Narromine belt up towards Ningen, and Alice Queen, who I works for, has been exploring on the Molong belt undercover and up to the north under the Surat Basin, etc. There's a few questions here about my work with Kincora. I don't think I'll answer those on here, but I'm happy to answer those if people want to get in touch with Kincora. We can answer those. And same for Alice Queen. What geophysics helps best getting to deep porphyries? That's a problem for geophysics. I think once you get that deep, like magnetics will help you find intrusive complexes, but any magnetite alteration, and that's probably going to be swamped by the magnetic response of the intrusions themselves. IP doesn't see as deep as people carry on about it. Like it sees fine if what it's seeing through is completely transparent to it, like what happened at OU Gully. No sulfide, nothing that's going to give you a chargeable response in what's above, and then you go into the sulfides. But in situations where you've got a big sulfidic halo, IP will just see the top of it, and after that, you know, where you drill into it, it's really, you've just got to drill holes and vector off the drilling using geochemistry, alteration, vein intensity, parameters like that. And so you need multiple drill holes to be able to vector to start with. You can't vector off a single drill hole. You can also try smart things like, you know, green rock geochemistry, etc.
I think they're the ones that we've, I think you've answered most of them that have come through. So thank you, everyone. I will, but yeah, if you want to stick around, we'll just close it off and get a bit more casual now. Grab a refreshment and yeah, everyone can jump off mute, get your cameras on, and yeah, I'll stop recording and we'll just all have a bit of a catch up before you head off on the weekend. So yeah, big thank you everyone for jumping on, and thanks so much again, John. It was great to have you on board.
Yeah, a pleasure, Jess. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.